This incident happened to me over Christmas holidays this past year, and it occurred to me that the sheer insanity of it may make it a good fit for this subreddit. For reference, I'm a 24-year-old female. My cousin and I decided to go up a few hours north for a nice winter cabin weekend. It went great and nothing creepy at all really happened. On our final day, we packed up at 6 a.m. and hopped in the car to get an early start on what was to be a 5-hour drive we had ahead of us. It was a foggy morning, not actively snowing, but previous snowfalls had piled up quite a bit, making the drive a little risky in the dark early hours of the morning. My cousin was driving and we were chatting and listening to podcasts, not too aware of our surroundings. We were around 20 minutes into the drive when, unfortunately, the car skidded off the road a little due to some black ice, and we very slightly grazed a tree. We got out to take a look, and by some miracle, there was no damage or anything on the car. As my cousin had started to laugh with relief, we were just thanking our luck. I shielded my eyes because of some idiot with their crazy high beams coming up behind us. "So obnoxious," my cousin laughed, starting to open her door to step back in when the car that was blinding us with its headlights honks and continues in our direction. My cousin and I looked at each other, super confused, but quickly hopped back in the car. The car begins to slow down, and we're able to see a man in the driver's seat. He finally takes his hand off the horn and pulls up right next to my cousin's car, which is really dumb because we were off-road and it was crazy slippery. He rolls down his window and motions for my cousin to roll down ours. We figure it's fine because he's still inside his car and we're in ours. I know, it's probably still a stupid move. "Hey there, ladies. In a rush this morning?" he laughs. Not really, just trying to get home. Can we help you with something?" my cousin replies. Totally stone cold poker face. "Oh no, I just noticed you dropped something about 2 kilometers back. It fell out of your trunk." My cousin turned to look at me. "Did you shut the trunk when we left?" "Yeah, dude, obviously," I replied, knowing that the way the car is shaped, we would have seen and definitely heard the open trunk. "No thanks, sir. I think you might have us mixed up with somebody else," my cousin said, and immediately rolled up her window. This man just gave off bad vibes, and he starts blaring his horn again and motioning for us to roll down the window. My cousin rolls it down again and sees him holding up a pair of some women's underwear and smiling. "See? This look familiar?" I can literally remember the exact tone with which he said that. "No thanks, sir. You have a great day now." My cousin quickly rolled up her window and again floored it, quickly hopping back on the road, and thankfully, the man was either taken aback or just gave up, and we didn't see him for the next hour or so. My cousin and I were both a little shaken up, but tried to laugh it off since we were safe and hadn't seen his car follow us or anything. About 2 hours into our trip, we get off an exit to fill up gas and grab some breakfast at Starbucks. My cousin and I mobile ordered, and I was gonna quickly run in to grab our food and drinks. It had started snowing at this point, and while the sun had been up for a little bit, it was still foggy and gloomy, which made it hard to see the surroundings. I ran in, and as I reached for our food, someone's arm reached over to grab mine, and I instantly flinched back. When I looked up, I truly almost shat myself. It was the fucking man, and despite him never getting out of the car, he did have his lights on and I was able to get a clear view of his face. It was him, and I was sure of it. "Look at us, just like old friends," he smiled at me. I immediately looked down, grabbed my food, and started walking out of the store. As I left, I heard him talking to the barista saying, "See that beauty queen? That's my beauty queen." What the fuck? I almost had tears in my eyes because I was so terrified. I power walked back to the car, almost tripping outside because I was so scared and not walking like a normal person. I hopped back in and screamed, We need to get the fuck back on the road. He's inside the fucking Starbucks." My cousin started laughing, thinking that I was pranking her, but she quickly realized that was not the case when the man walked out of the Starbucks a few seconds later, with no drink or food in hand, walking straight towards our car. My cousin quickly started to turn the car on when the man reached into his pocket, which I genuinely thought he was going to pull out a weapon, and started holding up the underwear he had before. Thankfully, my cousin took no time in backing out of there and speeding back onto the highway. We both were freaking out at this point, not sure how we ended up at the same stop. We hadn't even seen his vehicle anywhere near us. He could have taken some sort of back roads we didn't know about, but it would have taken him much longer than us to get there. Unless he was trailing behind? Fuck, I don't know. We quickly tried to find an alternate route on our maps, and thankfully, there was one that made us go through some local roads which we hoped might help. Of course, with our luck, as we were going through a smaller town, I felt the car getting gradually lower on my side. We pulled over to a well-lit gas station and realized that we were losing air in one of the tires. We were both too scared to get out, but figured if we went out together it might be less scary. So that's what we did, and we filled up the tire with some air and it seemed to be all okay. We got back in the car, back on our way, and everything seemed fine until about 10 minutes later when the car seemed to appear out of nowhere behind us. My cousin and I looked at each other, having no idea what to do if it were the man. Our suspicions were confirmed when he blared his stupid horn yet again and then quickly swerved off the road to get right next to us. So this time, he was on my side. He had his window rolled down and was screaming at us. At this point, I gave zero fucks and called my brother-in-law, who's a cop. I know I should have already called the police already at this point, and it was a stupid move, but in the moment I was just trying to justify this as being not that serious. My bro-in-law told us to drive directly to the nearest police station and to call them right away so they would be on alert. Literally as he was instructing me, the creep braked his car and just stopped on the side of the snowy, icy road. We were still speeding away, so it got harder and harder to see him, but from what I could make out, he had gotten out of his car and was sitting on the hood. Just fucking sitting on the hood of his car, freezing in snowy weather. My cousin and I did not want to stop or do anything, with about an hour left in our journey. So we decided to just book it straight home, and thankfully that was the end of that. I know we made a lot of stupid mistakes that could have potentially had horrible consequences, but I'm super happy we made it out, alive and unharmed. I still don't know how he caught up to us, seemingly magically, and why he just sat there at the end, but I don't even want to find out at this point. This past September, I had taken a road trip down to Myrtle Beach with my family. It was myself, my mother, my sister, and her husband and their 2 kids. We had used my car and both my sister and her husband's car to transport everything and all of us. We had rented a beach house for a little over a week and honestly had a pretty great time. I was in the middle of a difficult point in my life and struggling with employment and being in between jobs, and also having started 2 new jobs fresh. I was a little low on funds and worried about making my car payments and the like, so I opted to head home 2 days early with my car so I could at least try to get a few more hours at work. My family expressed being nervous as I planned to leave after dinner and drive through the night to get home. I consoled them that I'd be okay and I was ready to stay up all night and drive and head straight home, and only stop for gas and food as needed. I'm an excellent driver, a tad impatient, and I tend to go until I absolutely had to stop to take a break. However, this would be a 12-hour trip and I knew I would need breaks. So I made a point to stop at every rest stop to at least get out and stretch, so I stayed awake and wouldn't get too sore. Going through West Virginia, I'm sure you guys know how secluded their rest stops and visitor centers are, especially when you're heading north from the south, going through the mountains. I stopped at a visitor center because they advertised having a fast food joint and I had to piss like a racehorse. This was sometime very late at night, maybe 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. Side note that sent shivers down my spine after what happens. I like to drive barefoot, so I pulled in, noticed the buildings with fast food were closed, so I drove around the lot and parked under a street light in front of the visitor center so I could use the restroom. Leaning out of my car door, I took my time putting my shoes on to walk inside. Having looked around and not seeing anything out of the ordinary, I checked my phone and grabbed my wallet before standing up to walk in, making sure my corn horn beeped to signal my doors were locked. Walking towards the center, I saw a man in a white hoodie standing at the edge of the sidewalk, leaning into the center. I didn't think much of it until I passed him and got an off vibe. I glanced over my shoulder and he was watching me walk in. For some reason, I glanced to my left as I turned back to face forward and noted another man sitting at the benches that were on the other side of tall, thin bushes. Instantly, I thought, nope. I went in and peed, and before I walked out of the bathroom, I called my roommate. As dumb as it was, because he was a good 4 to 6 hours away, I just felt safer. I gave him a quick rundown of my situation and made him stay on the phone with me. I started to walk out and I couldn't see the man at the front of the sidewalk anymore. I glanced to my now right and saw both men standing next to a bench, facing forward. I saw a couple walking in to presumably use the restroom as well. I had the impulse to ask them to walk with me, but my paranoia kicked in because I knew something was wrong somewhere in my situation and I didn't ask, thinking that they might know the men. Walking briskly to my car, I explained to my roommate that the men were by the benches. Daring the smallest peeks over my shoulder again, I saw the man in the white hoodie walking towards me and I told my roommate. Walking a few more paces forward, I looked back again and saw his pace had quickened. At this point, I told my roommate he's following me to my car and I booked it. Thankfully, I had a key fob. I got my key out and ready and unlocked my car and practically threw myself in, not daring a glance back. I threw my car in reverse and gunned it backwards before going back into drive and sped off like I didn't even stop to put my seatbelt on till I was at the exit to leave the parking lot. I didn't look back once. I stopped at the next toll road and filed a report, and the workers called for the state troopers to head over and check things out. I didn't stop shaking for hours and I refused to get out of my car until I was home. I horrified myself at the thought of if those guys had paid attention and made their move more quickly, they could have incapacitated me at my car while I was facing the ground and putting my shoes on, and I could have had absolutely no self-defense. I was on a cross-country road trip with a colleague, and we were driving through West Texas on a major highway. In the area where we were, there was a major highway that was pretty desolate. There had been a truck stop or gas station about every 100 miles, and every one of them was solitary with no other buildings in sight. These weren't really towns, just exits and just places to get more gas to get to the next gas station. It was pretty late at night and she had been driving for like 4 hours. I usually can drive for about 8 before I'm tired out. Note that I frequently take road trips, but she could only manage 4 or 5 before it was my turn again. We were also getting low on gas at about a quarter tank, and what you learn from road travel is to fill up when you get the chance. So she was looking for a gas station as we drove along. It's really corny, but we were talking about fate and destiny and some other weird shit at the time. That kind of conversation gets me keyed up and worried, so I was trying to change the subject. She took an exit while we were talking, and I got out my coffee mug so I could fill up for my turn driving. We pulled into a typical Nowhereville gas station. where the only buildings in sight was the actual station and just a trailer out back, which I assume, thinking back on it, was probably where the owners lived. There was also one other car parked in front of the doors off to one side. So we got out, still talking, and walked up to the double doors, each of us grabbing a door handle. The doors were locked. I turned and looked around to see if there was a sign. Sometimes places will put up a "back in 5 minutes" kind of sign, or piece of paper, or just something like that, and noticed several things in succession. The coffee maker inside was halfway done brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The monitors that showed the store were visible from outside, where we were, but all of them showing static, and there was a splash of bright red on the door in the back of the place, which had been closed. I suddenly realized I was looking at a huge streak of blood with handprints in it. Every hair on my neck stood up, and my friend began shaking the door, yelling, "We need to get gas!" But I had already turned and walked away from the doors. "We have to leave now." I grabbed her arm and started propelling her back to the car. Now I noticed the one other car in the lot. It had no plates, and it was dingy and had a bunch of dents all over it. There was an empty gun rack in the window of it as well. I ran to the car, dragging her with me. She seemed to take forever to open her door and get in, and noted that she still had the keys on her. The whole time she kept saying, "But we need gas," while I tried to explain to her, "There's blood in there, blood." After what seemed like a year, she finally pulled the car out, and when we were backing up, I saw through the windows that the back door in the gas station was open. We had pulled away before anybody came out, thankfully. I freaked out until we were 20 miles down the highway. I tried to call the police, but had no signal. I didn't get a phone signal until we had driven around 40 miles to another truck stop. Again, not in town, just a building on its own in the middle of nothingness. I called the cops and they thanked me, and I never heard anything more about it. To this day, I feel like if I hadn't freaked out, we probably would have met the robber, or whoever it was that was in the back room of that place. I also wish I had been able to find out what the hell happened there. It was a Chevron station somewhere in the western part of Texas, at least within about 100 miles or so of the signs for those places. I think around Route 10. So if you're ever driving late at night and happen to come across a truck stop or gas station that looks abandoned or something looks suspicious, use your time wisely and get the fuck out of there.